Commander Jake Morrison walked into the big hall where all the alien leaders sat. His face was angry, but he tried to hide it. The human group had been called to this meeting to explain what the aliens called the incident. But Jake knew it was much more than just an incident. It was the day humanity finally said enough. 3 days ago, the Vorthan Empire had done something terrible. They destroyed a human colony called New Haven. They said the humans were living on their sacred hunting grounds. 2 million people died in seconds. Men, women, children, old people, babies. All gone. These families had worked for years to make that world their home. They had built cities, farms, and schools. They had made a life there. The Vorthans were big, strong aliens who thought they were the best hunters in the galaxy. They had done this before to other alien races. They would pick a world, say it was theirs, and then kill everyone living there. Other aliens would complain, but nothing ever happened. The Vorthans were too strong and everyone was too scared to fight them, but they had never done this to humans before. Captain Lisa Hayes was the first human to see what happened. She was flying her ship called the Retribution when she got a call for help from New Haven. When she arrived, there was nothing left, just pieces of metal and rock floating in space. The Vorthan ships were still there, celebrating their kill. Like animals after a hunt, Lisa had never felt so angry in her life. She had friends on New Haven, good people who just wanted to live in peace. She sent a message back to Earth. It was only 4 words: the gloves are off. On Earth, Admiral Ben Parker was at his daughter's wedding. He was walking her down the aisle when he got Lisa's message. He read it and his face went white. He whispered something to his daughter, kissed her forehead, and left the church. His little girl was getting married, the happiest day of her life, but he had to go. Because those 4 words meant everything was about to change. Ben called all the top military leaders to a secret meeting. They met in a room deep underground, a place where no one could hear them. The room was full of maps, computers, and screens, showing all the human colonies in space. For 6 hours, they talked about things that had been just ideas before. Plans they hoped they would never have to use. But now they had to use them. Dr. Helen Martinez was one of the people at that meeting. She was a scientist who studied alien bodies and how they worked. Everyone thought she did this to help make medicine and understand aliens better. But that was not the whole truth. For years, she had been finding ways to hurt aliens if humans ever needed to. She studied their weak spots, what could make them sick, what could kill them, the other aliens. In the galaxy thought humans were weak and stupid. They shared their science and knowledge freely because they believed humans could never be a threat. They were wrong. Humans had been learning everything about them, storing it all away for a day like this. Helen opened her secret files and showed the military leaders what she had discovered. Ways to kill every alien race in the galaxy. Viruses that would work on some, poisons for others. Weapons that could break their special shields. She had been preparing for war while everyone else thought about peace. "We tried to be nice, Admiral," Parker said to the room. "We followed their rules. We asked permission for everything. We said sorry when we did nothing wrong, but nice is over. They killed our people. They killed our children. Now they will learn what humans are really like." The leaders agreed to activate something called the Final Protocol. It was a plan that would use every weapon, every ship, every soldier that humans had. But more than that, it would use the one thing that made humans different from all the other aliens in the galaxy. Humans were the only race that had spent their whole history fighting and killing each other. Every other alien race had found peace on their homeworlds before they went to space. They had learned to work together, to be civilized, to solve problems without violence. But humans were different. Humans had fought wars for thousands of years. They had built weapons that could destroy their whole planet. They had learned every possible way to kill, to hurt, to destroy. The aliens thought this made humans primitive and stupid. They were wrong. It made humans the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. Captain Danny Rodriguez got his orders while his ship was patrolling near the edge of human space. He was told to take his fleet to the Vorthan home system. Not to talk, not to negotiate, but to show them what happened when you killed human families. Danny was a quiet man who loved his wife and 3 kids. He sent them letters every day when he was away. He had never wanted to hurt anyone. But when he thought about those 2 million people on New Haven, about the children who died scared and alone, something cold and hard grew in his chest. Major. Amy Collins was getting ready for something that had never been done before. She was in charge of the Xenocide Division, a secret group that had been preparing biological weapons. Each weapon was made to kill one specific alien race. The Vorthons were proud of their strong bodies and their ability to heal quickly. Amy had created a virus that would turn their greatest strength into their worst nightmare. The virus would keep them alive while it slowly destroyed them from the inside. They would feel every moment of pain, but their healing ability would not let them die quickly. It would take days, maybe weeks. And they would know that humans had done this to them. General Rick Thompson was ready to make the announcement that would change everything. He was going to tell the whole galaxy what would happen to anyone who hurt humans. Not a threat, not a warning, but a promise. A promise written in blood and backed by weapons that could crack planets in half. The humans had been preparing for this day without knowing it. Every war they had fought on Earth had taught them something new. Every weapon they had built had made them stronger. Every enemy they had defeated had made them smarter. Now they would use all of that knowledge against aliens who had never really fought for their lives. Jake Morrison stood in that hall full of alien leaders and remembered all of this. He remembered the call from New Haven. He remembered the look on Admiral Parker's face when he left his daughter's wedding. He remembered Dr. Martinez opening her files full of ways to kill gods. The aliens in the hall were scared. They had heard rumors about what humans had done to the Vorthons. Some of them had been allies with the Vorthon Empire. Some of them had looked the other way when the Vorthons killed other races. Now they were wondering if humans would come for them too. Jake looked at each of them slowly. He saw fear in their eyes. Good, they should be afraid. For too long, humans had been the ones who were scared. Scared of making the aliens angry. Scared of breaking their rules. Scared of being kicked out of their councils and clubs. Those days were over. Now it was time for the aliens to be afraid. Time for them to learn that humans were not the weak, stupid race they thought they were. Time for them to learn that when you push humans too far, when you kill their families and destroy their homes, they do not just get mad, they get even, and when humans get even, entire civilizations disappear. Captain Danny Rodriguez looked at the screens in front of him. His ship was moving through space toward the Vorthon home system. Behind him, 50 other human ships followed in perfect formation. They were not the biggest ships in the galaxy, and they were not the most advanced. But they carried something that no alien ship had ever seen before. Pure human anger. Danny had been a soldier for 20 years. He had fought in the colony wars when humans were still learning to live in space. He had seen friends die and enemies surrender, but he had never felt anything like this. The cold, hard feeling in his chest that made him want to destroy everything the Vorthons had ever built. "Sir, we are getting close to their space," said Lieutenant Karen White, his second in command. "Their patrol ships are asking us to stop and identify ourselves." Danny looked at the alien ships on his screen. They were huge, covered in armor and weapons. Each one was bigger than 3 human ships put together. The Vorthons had been building these ships for thousands of years, making them stronger and deadlier with each generation. "Tell them we are delivering a message," Danny said. "From the people of New Haven." The Vorthon commander appeared on the screen. He was a massive creature covered in scales and scars. His teeth were sharp like knives, and his eyes were yellow like a predator. He had probably killed thousands of beings in his lifetime. "Human ships, you are not welcome here," the Vorthon said in a deep, growling voice. "Turn around and go back to your small worlds. This is sacred space." Danny smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a man who knew something. The other person did not. "Sacred space," Danny said. "You mean the space where you celebrate killing our families?" Where you dance around the pieces of our children? That sacred space? The Vorthan laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Your species is weak. You cry about a few dead colonists. In the old days, strong races took what they wanted. Weak races died. This is the natural order. You are right, Danny said. Strong races take what they want. Weak races die. Thank you for reminding us of that. Danny cut the connection and turned to his weapons officer. Fire everything. The human ships did not use the same weapons as other aliens. While other races had built energy shields and plasma cannons, humans had built something much simpler and much more deadly. They had built guns that threw pieces of metal very, very fast. The chunks of metal that came out of human ships were moving at almost the speed of light. They were not fancy. They were not high-tech. They were just heavy pieces of iron and steel. Moving faster than anything in space had a right to move. When the first chunk hit a Vorthan ship, it went through the shields like they were not there. It went through the armor like it was paper. It went through the entire ship from one end to the other, and then it kept going into the ship behind it. The Vorthan commander had time to look, surprised before his ship exploded into a cloud of hot gas and metal pieces. Danny watched 12 Vorthan ships disappear in less than 10 seconds. Ships that had destroyed entire civilizations. Ships that had made whole alien races extinct. Gone in the time it took to blink. Sir, Karen said, her voice shaking a little. Vorthan Third Fleet is requesting permission to surrender. Danny looked at the remaining enemy ships. They were running away as fast as they could. These were supposed to be the greatest warriors in the galaxy. The race that had made everyone else afraid. Now they were running from humans like scared. Children, no surrender, Danny said. Today we teach the galaxy what happens when you kill human families. The human ships chased down the fleeing Vorthans one by one. Each enemy ship that died sent a message across space. The message was simple. Humans were not weak anymore. While Danny was destroying the Vorthan fleet, Major Amy Collins was getting ready for Phase 2 of the human response. She was in a secret lab on Earth, looking at vials of liquid that would change everything. Amy had been a doctor before she became a soldier. She had spent years studying how to save lives, how to heal the sick, how to make people better. But when she saw what the Vorthans had done to New Haven, she decided to use her knowledge for something else. The virus she had created was beautiful in its simplicity. It was designed to work only on Vorthan biology. It would not hurt humans, or any other alien race. But to Vorthans, it was the perfect weapon. The virus worked by attacking the same biological systems that made Vorthans such good hunters. Their enhanced healing, their superior strength, their ability to survive in harsh environments. The virus would turn all of these advantages into weaknesses. Are you sure about this? Asked Dr. Bob Turner, Amy's assistant. Once we release this, there is no going back. Every Vorthan in the galaxy will die. Amy looked at the pictures on her wall. Pictures of the human colonies that had been destroyed by alien races over the years. Pictures of children who had died because their parents had believed that aliens could be reasoned with. They made the choice when they killed our people, Amy said. Now they live with the consequences. Amy loaded the virus into small containers that looked like meteors. These would be fired at Vorthan worlds and would spread the virus through their air and water. Within days, every Vorthan in the galaxy would be infected. The virus would not kill them quickly. That would be too easy. Instead, it would make them suffer the same way they had made other races suffer. Slowly, painfully, with plenty of time. To think about what they had done, General Rick Thompson was ready to make the announcement that would change galactic history. He stood in front of cameras that would broadcast. His message to every world in known space. Rick was an old soldier who had fought in more wars than he could count. He had seen the best and worst of humanity. He had hoped that when humans went to space, they would leave their violent nature behind. He had been wrong. People of the galaxy, Rick said, looking directly into the camera. Today, the Vorthan Empire attacked and destroyed the human colony of New Haven. 2 million innocent people died. Men, women, children, elderly. All killed because the Vorthans wanted to hunt on their world. Rick paused, letting the words sink in across the galaxy. We tried to be civilized. We followed your rules. We asked permission for everything. We said, sorry when we did nothing wrong. We believed that reason and diplomacy could solve all problems. We were wrong. On screens across the galaxy, aliens watched as the human general's face grew cold and hard. From this moment forward, any attack on human civilians will result in the complete extinction of the attacking species, not defeat. Not conquest, extinction. We will kill every member of your race and burn every world you have ever touched. Rick smiled, but it was a smile that made even humans watching feel uncomfortable. The Vorthan Empire no longer exists. Their ships are destroyed. Their worlds are infected with a virus that will kill every one of them. In 72 hours, there will be no Vorthans left in the galaxy. This is not a threat. This is a promise. As Rick spoke, human ships were already moving to attack Vorthan colonies across 17 different star systems. The attacks were perfectly coordinated, as if humans had been planning this for years, which they had. The Vorthan homeworld was a beautiful place, with purple seas and golden mountains. Cities that had stood for 10,000 years stretched across the continents. Art and culture that had taken millennia to create filled museums and libraries. Commander Steve Johnson watched it all burn from his ship in orbit. The virus had already reached the planet, and the Vorthans were starting to die. Their proud warriors were falling in the streets, their bodies betraying them just as they had betrayed every other race in the galaxy. Sir, said his communications officer, we are getting surrender requests from 47 different Vorthan colonies. Steve thought about the children on New Haven, about the families that had been vaporized while they slept, about the dreams and hopes that had died with them. Ignore them, Steve said. Today we finish what they started. By the end of the day, the Vorthan Empire was gone. Not defeated, not conquered, but completely eliminated. Their homeworld was a dead rock. Their colonies were empty. Their mighty fleets were floating debris. The galaxy had learned something important about humans. They were not weak. They were not stupid. They were not civilized. They were the most dangerous thing in the universe, and they were just getting started. The news of the Vorthan Empire's complete destruction spread across the galaxy like wildfire. In the great halls of the Galactic Council, alien leaders who had ruled for thousands of years sat in stunned silence. The Vorthans had been one of the most powerful races in known space. They had conquered hundreds of worlds and enslaved dozens of species. Now they were gone, wiped out by humans in less than 3 days. Ambassador Chris Baker stood before the assembled council members, his face calm but his eyes hard as steel. He had been Earth's representative for 10 years, always trying to make peace, always asking for permission, always apologizing when humans did something the aliens did not like. Those days were over. The Galactic Council declares humanity a rogue species, announced High Counselor Zethkri of the Ethereal Collective. The Ethereals were ancient beings made of pure energy who had been alive since before most stars were born. They considered themselves the wisest race in the galaxy. You have committed genocide against the Vorthans. This cannot be allowed. Chris laughed, a sound that made several alien counselors flinch. Genocide? The Vorthans killed 2 million of our people. Children, families, innocent civilians. We simply returned the favor. The Vorthans were following ancient law, said Counselor Veltar of the Crystal Hegemony. Strong races take what they need. Weak races submit or die. This has been the way for millions of years. Then you should understand what we did, Chris replied. We were stronger. They were weaker, they died. This is the natural order, right? The council chamber erupted in angry voices. 7 major civilizations had already agreed to form the Grand Alliance against humanity. They were convinced that primitive humans could be easily defeated if they worked together. They had never been more wrong about anything in their lives. Chris raised his hand for silence. When the chamber was quiet, he delivered humanity's final message to the galaxy. We tried to be civilized. We followed your rules, respected your customs, and sought peace with all of you. We asked permission to colonize empty worlds. We traded fairly. We helped other races when they needed it. We believe that reason and diplomacy could solve any problem. Chris paused, looking at each alien leader in turn. That time is over. Any fleet that approaches human space will be destroyed. Any world that helps our enemies will be burned. Any species that threatens human civilians will be extinct before the week is over. We are not asking for your acceptance anymore. We are telling you how things will be. The first wave of the Grand Alliance consisted of ships from the crystal hegemony. These were beings made of living crystal who had existed for millions of years. They considered themselves immortal because their crystal bodies could repair any damage. Their ships were massive fortresses that had survived battles. Across the eons. Admiral Kate Murphy was waiting for them at the edge of human space. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes who looked like someone's grandmother. She had been a physics professor before the war started. Now she commanded the most advanced fleet humanity had ever built. "Crystal ships approaching," reported Captain Larry Adams, her tactical officer. 37 vessels, each one the size of a small moon. Kate nodded calmly. "Deploy the quantum disruptors." The quantum disruptors were humanity's newest weapon, designed specifically to fight the crystal hegemony. Dr. Paul Anderson, Earth's leading weapons expert, had spent years studying crystalline alien technology. He had discovered that the quantum bonds holding their crystal bodies together could be disrupted with the right frequency. The human ships were tiny compared to the crystal fortresses, but when they fired their disruptors, something amazing happened. The massive alien ships simply stopped existing. Not destroyed, not damaged, but completely unmade at the quantum level. The crystals that had survived for millions of years were reduced to elementary particles in seconds. The crystal hegemony's crews, beings who had never known death, experienced something worse than dying. They felt their very existence being erased from reality. The few who survived would never be the same. "My God," whispered Captain Adams, "they're just done." "Good," Kate said without emotion. "Send a message to the rest of the Alliance. Tell them this is what happens when you threaten human families." The next to attack was the Psionic Dominion, a race of beings who controlled other species through telepathy. They had ruled over dozens of worlds by taking control of alien minds. Their leaders had never physically fought a battle because they did not need to. They simply made their enemies fight each other. Colonel Maria Santos was ready for them. She had been a brain surgeon before becoming a soldier, and she understood how minds worked better than anyone. When she learned about the Psionic Dominion's abilities, she had developed a way to fight back. Every human soldier now had a neural implant in their brain. These implants did not just block telepathic attacks. They reflected them back, amplified and twisted into something horrible. When the Dominion's fleet tried to take control of the human crews, they instead found their minds invaded by the chaotic, violent thoughts of a species that had spent millions of years killing each other. Human minds were filled with memories of every war, every battle, every act of violence that had ever happened on Earth. The telepathic feedback was overwhelming. Dominion commanders who had controlled minds for centuries were driven insane in minutes. They experienced every human nightmare, every human fear, every human rage all at once. "Sir, the alien fleet is breaking apart," reported Lieutenant Jenny Clark from the bridge of Santos's ship. "Their crews are attacking each other." Maria watched the alien ships tear themselves apart as their crews lost control. It was almost too easy. These beings had never learned to fight with their bodies because they had always fought with their minds. Now their greatest weapon had become their greatest weakness. "Let them destroy each other," Maria said. "Maybe they will understand what it feels like to be helpless." One by one, the Grand Alliance fleets were not just defeated but completely eliminated. The Molten Core Republic, beings made of living lava, found their ships frozen solid by human ice weapons. The Void Seekers, creatures who lived in the empty space between stars, were pulled into artificial black holes that humans had learned to create. Each victory was more devastating than the last. The galaxy's most powerful races were learning that their advantages meant nothing against humans who had studied their weaknesses for decades on the world of Kepler Prime. The remaining leaders of the Grand Alliance held an emergency meeting. These were beings who had conquered galaxies, who had ruled for millions of years, who had considered themselves the masters of the universe. Now they were scared. "The humans are not fighting like any species we have known," said General Horthick of the Blade Runners, a race of warrior insects. "They do not seek glory or honor. They simply want to kill us all." "They have studied us," added Counselor Yathara of the Mind Weavers. "They know our weaknesses, our fears, our secrets." "How is this possible?" The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Zindri, a scientist who had worked with humans for years, stood up slowly. Her forearms were shaking, and her usually calm voice was filled with terror. "We taught them," she said quietly. "We shared our knowledge freely because we thought they were too primitive to be dangerous. We showed them our technology, our biology, our culture. We told them everything about ourselves because we believed they could never use it against us." The chamber fell silent as the terrible truth sank in. "They have been preparing for this war since the day they met us," Zendri continued. "Every trade agreement, every scientific exchange, every diplomatic meeting, they were learning how to kill us. On Earth, President Roger Williams received reports from battles across the galaxy. Human forces were winning everywhere, but the cost was becoming clear. The galaxy's remaining civilizations were uniting against humanity. Soon, every alien race would be fighting for their survival." "Sir," said General Mike Foster, "intelligence reports suggest the remaining alien forces are preparing a final assault. They are gathering ships from across the galaxy." Roger looked out the window at the city below. Children were playing in the parks. People were going to work, falling in love, building lives. This was what they were fighting for. Not conquest, not glory, but the right to exist without fear. "How many ships are they bringing?" Roger asked. "Thousands, sir, maybe tens of thousands. Every surviving warship in the galaxy," Roger nodded slowly. "And how many do we have?" "About 300 combat vessels, sir," Roger smiled. "Then it will be a fair fight." The final battle was coming. The galaxy's surviving races would make one last attempt to destroy humanity before they were destroyed themselves. They still did not understand what they were facing. They were not fighting a species. They were fighting an idea. The idea that no one had the right to hurt human families. The idea that there were some lines that should never be crossed, and ideas, once unleashed, were impossible to kill. The defeat of the Grand Alliance sent shockwaves through the galaxy that reached places most beings did not even know existed. In dimensions hidden from normal space, ancient beings who had watched the universe grow from nothing began to stir. They had been sleeping for millions of years, content to let younger races play their games of war and peace, but now something had happened that demanded their attention. A young species had done the impossible. They had defeated races that the ancients themselves had created. They had broken rules that had existed since the first stars were born. The architects were waking up. "Commander, Alex Turner was leading humanity's most advanced fleet when the message came." It did not arrive through radio or any technology he understood. Instead, it appeared directly in his mind, in words that seemed to burn themselves into his thoughts. "Cease your actions, young species. You threaten the balance we have maintained for millions of years." Alex was a tough man who had fought in every major battle since the war began. He had seen friends die and enemies surrender. He had watched entire alien civilizations disappear under human weapons. But this voice in his head made him feel something he had not felt in years: fear. "Sir, are you all right?" asked Captain Betty Moore, his second in command. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Alex looked around his ship's bridge. His crew was staring at him with concern. Apparently, he was the only one who had heard the voice. "Send a message to Earth," Alex said quietly. "Tell them the architects are awake." On Earth, Dr. Susan Brooks received Alex's message while she was working in her secret laboratory. Susan was humanity's expert on ancient alien technology, the weird devices and structures that had been found on dead worlds across the galaxy. Most scientists thought these artifacts were just curiosities, remnants of civilizations that had died out long ago. Susan knew better. She had been studying these artifacts for 20 years, and she had discovered something that terrified her. The architects were not just another ancient race. They were the beings who had created most of the life in the galaxy. They had seeded worlds with primitive organisms and guided their evolution for millions of years. Most alien races worshipped them as gods, and now humanity had gotten their attention. "Sir," Susan said to President Williams over a secure communication line, "we have a problem. The architects are intervening. They consider us a threat to their cosmic order." President Williams was in his office, looking at reports from battles across the galaxy. Human forces were winning everywhere, but the victories were becoming more costly. The remaining alien races were getting desperate, and desperate enemies were dangerous. "What exactly are we dealing with, Doctor?" the president asked. Susan pulled up holographic displays showing the artifacts she had studied. Ancient machines that could move stars, weapons that could destroy entire solar systems, devices that could manipulate time itself. "The architects are not just advanced, sir. They are effectively gods. They have technology that makes our most advanced weapons look like stone knives. They have been guiding galactic evolution for longer than our species has existed." The president was quiet for a long moment. "And they want us to stop fighting? They want us to go back to being the weak, primitive species that follows orders and asks permission for everything. They want the old balance restored." President Williams smiled grimly. "Then they are going to be disappointed. The architects' first demonstration of their power was intended to humble humanity. They reached across space to Earth itself, planning to disable the planet's defenses and remind humans of their place in the cosmic order. They found something waiting for them. Colonel Frank Martinez had been preparing for this moment since the war began. He was Earth's defense coordinator, responsible for protecting humanity's homeworld from any threat. When Dr. Brooks had warned him about the architects, he had begun the most ambitious construction project in human history. Every city on Earth was now connected to a massive network of energy collectors and redirectors. Every military base, every civilian shelter, every farm and factory was part of a planetary defense grid that could absorb and redirect energy attacks. The architects sent their divine fire toward Earth, expecting to see the planet's defenses crumble. Instead, they watched in amazement as their own power was captured, concentrated, and fired back at them. "Sir, the energy redirection is working perfectly," reported Lieutenant Tom Wilson from the main control center. "We're absorbing their attack and storing it in the planetary grid." Frank watched the displays showing energy levels across Earth. The architects' attack had been powerful enough to destroy a star, but Earth's grid was handling it easily. Humanity had learned to turn their enemies' strength against them. "Good," Frank said. "Now let's show them what we do with their divine fire." The captured energy was focused into a single beam and fired back at the architect's hidden dimension. The beings who had styled themselves as gods found their own weapons turned against them. Their ancient strongholds, protected by technology beyond mortal understanding, were breached by humans who had learned to fight with the power of gods. Captain Nancy Williams was leading humanity's first trans-dimensional assault. Her ship was equipped with experimental technology that could punch holes in reality itself. She had volunteered for this mission knowing that she might not come back. "Ma'am, we're approaching the architect's dimension," reported her navigator, Lieutenant Carl Jones. "The readings are strange. It's like space itself is alive here." Nancy looked at the screens showing impossible geometries and structures that hurt to look at directly. This was the realm of beings who had created galaxies. For fun, who had guided evolution across millions of worlds. "Remember," Nancy said to her crew, "they may be gods, but they bleed like everyone else. Today we prove that." The human fleet entered the architect's dimension like a virus entering a body. They were tiny compared to the vast structures around them, but they carried something the architects had never faced before. The focused hatred of a species that refused to bow to anyone. The first architect that Nancy encountered was a being of pure energy and thought, vast beyond comprehension. It had existed since before the first galaxies formed. It had watched civilizations rise and fall like seasons. It had never known fear. "You dare enter our sacred realm?" The architect's voice echoed through space itself. "We created your galaxy, we guided your evolution, we are your gods." Nancy's ship fired a single shot. The weapon was based on quantum disruption technology, the same principle that had destroyed the crystal hegemony, but amplified 1,000 times. The architect's energy form began to unravel, its ancient consciousness scattered across dimensions. "You created us," Nancy said as she watched the god die. "But you made us too well? You made us survivors? You made us fighters, you made us human." The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Humans fought beings who could reshape reality with their thoughts. They battled entities that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They killed gods who had been alive since the universe was young, and they won. The architects' death screams echoed across every psychic frequency in the galaxy. Every telepathic species in known space felt the agony of beings who had considered themselves immortal. The sound was so terrible that several entire civilizations went insane from hearing it. Dr. Brooks monitored the battle from Earth, watching as humanity's forces systematically dismantled the infrastructure that had allowed the architects to maintain their godlike status. Devices that had existed for millions of years were destroyed in minutes. Weapons that could unmake stars were turned into scrap metal. "Sir," she reported to President Williams, "we're winning. The architects' dimensional strongholds are falling. One by one, their ancient technologies being neutralized." The president looked out at the night sky, knowing that somewhere among those stars, humans were fighting gods and winning. "How many of them are left?" "Readings suggest about 12% of their original forces remain, sir. They're retreating to their deepest sanctuaries. Tell our forces to follow them." Today we finish what the architects started when they decided to threaten humanity. The final phase of the battle took place in the architects' most sacred realm, a place where they had stored the templates for all life in the galaxy. This was where they had designed the first living creatures, where they had planned the evolution of entire species. Commander Joe Parker led the assault on this final stronghold. He was a quiet man who had joined the military to see the galaxy, not to fight wars. But when he thought about the architects' arrogance, their belief that they had the right to control all life, he felt the same cold anger that had driven humanity since New Haven. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures ahead," reported his weapons officer. "The remaining architects are making their last stand." Joe looked at the structure in front of them. It was beautiful and terrible, a cathedral of light and energy that stretched across dimensions. Inside were the last of the beings who had created gods. "All ships, prepare for final assault," Joe ordered. "Today we teach the universe that no one is too powerful to die." The battle was brief but decisive. The architects threw everything they had at the human fleet. Reality itself bent and twisted around them. Time moved backward. The silence that followed the architects' defeat was unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. For millions of years, these ancient beings had been a constant presence in the background of galactic civilization. Their influence had shaped the growth of every star system, guided the evolution of every species, and maintained the balance of power across the universe. Now they were gone, killed by a species that had achieved faster than light travel less than a century ago. Admiral Tony Davis stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the wreckage of the architect's final stronghold. Pieces of technology that had existed since the birth of the universe floated in space like broken toys. The weapons that had once been able to create and destroy galaxies were now nothing more than scrap metal. "Sir," said his communications officer, Lieutenant Sarah Park, "we're receiving surrender requests from over 200 alien civilizations. They're all asking for mercy." Tony was a career military man who had spent his life following orders and protecting humanity. He had never wanted to rule over anyone. He had only wanted to make sure that human families could live in peace without fear of alien attack. "Patch me through to all remaining alien governments," Tony said. "It's time to explain how things will work now." The transmission went out across the galaxy, reaching every surviving alien civilization. On thousands of worlds, beings who had once considered themselves the masters of the universe gathered around their communication devices to hear what the humans had to say. "People of the galaxy," Tony began, his voice calm but firm. "The war is over, the Vorthans are extinct. The Grand Alliance is destroyed, the architects are dead. We are not here to conquer you or rule over you. We are not interested in your worlds or your resources. We simply want to be left alone to live our lives in peace." Tony paused, looking directly into the camera that would carry his words to every corner of known space. "But understand this. We have demonstrated what happens when that peace is threatened. Any species that harms human civilians will face complete extinction. Any government that supports attacks on human colonies will be removed from existence. Any individual who threatens human families will discover that there is nowhere in the galaxy to hide." The message continued to broadcast as alien leaders across the galaxy listened in stunned silence. These were beings who had ruled for thousands of years, who had commanded vast fleets and controlled entire star systems. Now they were being told how to behave by a species they had considered primitive barbarians just months ago on the world of Sector Prime. The emergency session of the Galactic Council survivors was in chaos. Only 43 of the original 300 council members were still alive. The rest had died in the war or had simply vanished when their civilizations were destroyed. "We must negotiate," said Counselor Vashti of the Silk Weavers, a race of spider-like beings who had survived by staying neutral during the conflict. "Surely the humans can be reasoned with." "Reasoned with?" The voice came from the back of the chamber, where a single figure sat alone in the shadows. "You still do not understand what we are dealing with." The figure stepped into the light and several council members gasped. It was HFY, the last surviving member of the Vorthan Empire. He had been off-world when the humans had released their virus, and he had watched from a distance as his entire species died in agony. "You want to negotiate with beings who created a virus specifically designed to kill my entire race?" HFY's voice was filled with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. "You want to reason with a species that killed gods?" HFY walked to the center of the chamber, his scarred body moving with the grace of a predator. Even after everything that had happened, he was still dangerous. But now he was the last of his kind, a living reminder of what happened when someone pushed humanity too far. "I have seen what they are capable of," HFY continued. "My people thought ourselves the galaxy's apex predators. We had conquered hundreds of worlds, enslaved dozens of species, and considered ourselves unstoppable. The humans did not just defeat us. They erased us so completely that our homeworld is now a navigation hazard." The alien counselors listened in terrified silence as HFY described the final days of his civilization. The virus that had turned their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. The human ships that had hunted down every fleeing survivor. The cold efficiency with which an entire species had been eliminated. "But that is not the most terrifying part," HFY said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The most terrifying part is their restraint. They could have done to all of us what they did to my people. They could have wiped out every species in the galaxy and remade it in their image. Instead, they chose to stop. They chose mercy for those who had not wronged them." The chamber was completely silent now. Even the most arrogant alien leaders were beginning to understand the new reality they faced. "They are not conquerors," HFY continued. "They are not interested in ruling over us. They simply want to exist without being threatened. But if you make them feel threatened again, if you harm their families or attack their worlds, they will kill you all. And there is nothing in the galaxy that can stop them." On Earth, President Williams was meeting with his top advisors to discuss the galaxy's future. The war had lasted less than a year, but it had changed everything. Humanity had gone from being a minor player in galactic politics to being the undisputed masters of known space. "Sir," said Secretary of Defense Ellen Foster, "we're getting reports that several alien species are asking to join the human sphere of influence. They want our protection." Williams looked at the reports on his desk. Dozens of alien civilizations were offering to become human protectorates, trading their independence for safety. They had seen what happened to humanity's enemies, and they wanted to make sure they never faced the same fate. "What do you think, General Martinez?" Williams asked his military advisor. General Carlos Martinez had been with the president since the beginning of the war. He had seen humanity transform from a peaceful species into the most feared force in the galaxy. Now he had to help decide what to do with that power. "Sir, I think we should be very careful," Martinez said. "Power like this can corrupt. We need to make sure we don't become the very thing we fought against." Williams nodded. "Draft a response to the alien governments. Tell them we're willing to establish a new galactic order based on one simple principle: leave us alone. And we'll leave you alone? But attack human civilians and face extinction." Captain Lavra Peterson was chosen to be Earth's new diplomatic representative to the galaxy. She had been a schoolteacher before the war, someone who believed in the power of education and understanding. Now she found herself negotiating with alien leaders who were terrified of what humanity might do next. "The terms are simple," Lavra explained to the assembled alien ambassadors. "Humanity will guarantee the safety of any species that agrees to our protection. In return, you will not attack human colonies, you will not threaten human civilians, and you will not interfere with human expansion into empty space." "And if we refuse?" asked Ambassador Kithara of the Floating Cities, a race of gas-dwelling beings who had remained neutral throughout the war. Lavra smiled, but it was not a warm smile. "Then you will be on your own. When the next crisis comes, when the next aggressive species decides to start conquering worlds, humanity will not help you. You will face whatever comes alone." The choice was clear: join humanity's new order and live under their protection, or remain independent and face an uncertain future without the galaxy's strongest military force to defend them. Most chose protection. Commander Jerry Robinson was given the task of dealing with the surviving architects. A few of the ancient beings had survived humanity's assault, but their power was broken and their divine status was revealed to be nothing more than advanced technology. "You have a choice," Jerry told the surviving gods. "You can accept that. Your time as rulers is over and live as equals among the other species, or you can choose not to exist at all." The once mighty architects, beings who had shaped galaxies and guided evolution across millions of worlds, were now reduced to begging for their lives from a species they had considered beneath notice. Most chose to live as mortals. The galaxy's new order was not imposed through conquest, but through the demonstrated consequences of opposing humanity. Species that had spent millennia believing in their own superiority now understood that they existed only because humans allowed them to exist. In the end, humanity had achieved something that no species in galactic history had managed. They had imposed peace not through diplomacy or negotiation, but through the absolute certainty that breaking that peace would result in extinction. The stars seemed to burn brighter now, as if the universe itself had taken notice of a species that had climbed from the mud of one small world to humble gods and reshaped the cosmos according to their will. Children played in parks on human worlds, unaware that their safety was guaranteed by the fear their species had instilled in every corner of the galaxy. Parents tucked their children into bed knowing that no alien fleet would ever again threaten their homes. And in the depths of space, alien civilizations that had once considered themselves the masters of the universe now sent prayers.